That's our guy right there. What's up, guys? It's Gary. Long time no see. So this project back here has definitely taken me a lot longer than I was planning on taking. There's been a bunch of times where I just lost motivation on it. It's not going to be worked on in this video. What we are going to do is actually mess with the truck, the old medium duty muscle truck. So some of you guys are here because you subscribed after you saw the Howl Pipe video on this thing. It's a 1985 Ford F8000 with a 3208 Caterpillar V8 diesel, V8 turbo diesel. And I wanted to address some of the comments, but, well, let me just straight up tell you what we're doing right now. We are going to basically max out the injection pump and do an acceleration run with the HP Tuners app that I have on my phone to see how fast it is. Now, I've done that before, so we're going to actually see if we have an improvement. And to address some of the comments about, you know, turning up the fuel or the boost, I know it's been a while. That was a couple months ago, that video, but there were comments like that. And the thing is, there is no turning up the boost. This turbo does not have a wastegate. This is ancient diesel turbo technology where it's just, you know, straight geometry set up for this engine to make roughly 15 pounds of boost. I don't actually have a boost gauge on it, but that's about what it's supposed to make, like 15 psi. No wastegate, so there's no turning the boost up. It just makes what it makes. The more fuel you put to the engine, the more, theoretically, it should make a little bit more boost. Under power right now, it doesn't really smoke at all. A little bit of haze out of the pipes, but when it's under boost, it doesn't smoke. Now, the injection pump is already turned up. That's the other thing you guys are talking about, turning the fuel up. It is already turned up quite a bit from factory, the factory settings. There's an AFRC, air fuel ratio controller. I've deleted that. So that really just is off boost. It gives it a little bit more throttle response. The RPM, the governor, is turned up. Factory on this engine was only 2200 RPM, and that is very low because this was a more economy spec setup. Typically the turbo versions in the trucks are like 2600 RPM, but this was a 2200 RPM. The naturally aspirated engines rev to 2800 RPM, so I went for that. I actually have the RPM, the governor set at about 2800 RPM. And the actual fuel rate itself, which on these injection pumps is more or less just a throttle stop, is cranked all the way out as far as it can go. Now, there's a little tiny bit more that we can get out of it potentially, and that is by removing that screw. So the screw for the throttle rate control, when you back it all the way out, there's still a couple millimeters of the screw itself to allow the couple millimeters more travel in the pump. So I'm going to actually remove that screw entirely and see what happens. And once we do that, we'll have to adjust the throttle linkage to compensate and get that extra bit of throttle. So we're going to do that, and we're going to go take it for a drive and see. I'm going to show you the results that I got the last time when I did this, which, by the way, I think also I might have not even been getting full throttle, so it may be significantly better. Might not be an exact A to B test, plus it was like a couple years ago. Regardless, let's get into this thing. I'm going to show you guys how to adjust these pumps, which is probably not going to matter to any of you because none of you probably have a 3208 Cat. But let's take a look. Alright, so there's the injection pump on the old 3208, and you'll notice, interestingly, the injection pump is a V8 as well. So, from what I understand, these are really not that far different from like a Bosch P pump in their design. You know, typical like plunger and barrel style, and then it has pintle style injectors. There's no mechanical device. There's no mechanical connection to the injectors. They're just, you know, plunger and barrel, squirts fuel out to a, you know, pop-it type like pintle injector where it just has like a spring inside of it. There are also different injectors for the different horsepower ratings. But that's another story right now. So basically what we're messing with here is down on the back, those access plates there is where we adjust the pump. And just a quick overview of what we're looking at. This is the shutdown solenoid, electronic shutdown solenoid. That plate right there is where the air-fuel ratio control would have gone. Vacuum line would go to that. That's the factory plate that would be on a naturally aspirated version of this pump. And yeah, so basically what we're going to do is get this air cleaner assembly out of our way, just to make it a little easier to get down in there, and I'll show you what we're dealing with. Another thing a lot of you guys were saying was to put a free-flowing intake on it to get more sound out of it, and yes, I would like to do that, and it probably would make a little bit of a difference in sound, but not a tremendous difference. I mean, these things, this engine has a pretty free-flowing inlet. You know, that's a good filter, a big housing. There's no silencer on this of any kind, you know, it's just a, and the thing about it is the cold air intake. It's got that tube, and that tube connects to that zip tube, which goes right to the front there. And it is a true, you know, basically ram air, cold air intake. You can see where it seals up to the front. So it's really, it's a setup that has little to be improved. As far as performance goes, you really can't, there's not much you could do to improve that with the stock, everything being stock. So now we got that all removed, we can get down here and you guys can see that that guy there that says high idle. So we're not going in there. That's the high idle adjustment. Our fuel rate adjustment is in here. And these do have gaskets, so if you do have a 32.8 and you're going to adjust it, I'd recommend getting the basic gasket kit. You can actually buy the full injection pump gasket kit. Now I don't have another gasket. I actually did this a while back and I had the gasket, I already replaced it. So I'm just kind of hoping that it doesn't rip the gasket and I can put it back and it'll be fine. Because there is fuel in there, and it will, in that area right there where the adjustment is, there is obviously fuel and it can leak. So keep that in mind if you're going to do this. Alright, she popped off nicely. And one thing, when I put that new gasket on there, I used some of that copper, you know, spray on copper. I think that actually helped with allowing the gasket to not completely stick to the metal. So that's nice. Another thing you got to keep in mind is that fuel will spill out of there, only a certain amount. And it should not affect, it will not affect the prime of the engine. You put that back on and it'll fire right up. So that is our guy right there that we're looking for. This here is your adjustment. So like I said, this is already adjusted all the way out. And the way this works on this engine, on this pump, is that when you go full throttle, there's a little pin that pops up inside there, and it comes out and hits that. And so the fuel rate from the factory is adjusted with that little screw, and all it really is a full throttle stop. And so adjusting the screw all the way out, backing this out, means you could just get more throttle travel out of the rack, out of the pump. And you do that, and then you adjust, you correspondingly adjust your actual throttle linkage, because if you don't, you're not going to get the extra throttle out of it. And that'll give you more power. And like I said, on this particular setup, it still really doesn't smoke out of the pipes under boost. I don't really think it's going to, even if we do this little bit of extra adjustment. So like I said, what we're going to do now is actually remove this screw entirely, because you'll see when I get this apart, there's still a couple millimeters of travel potentially left if we take the screw out of the equation altogether. So we just need to remove this nut and this Allen bolt right here. and that'll just take this whole like deal off so we can get the screw out. All right, so that's our guy right there, and you can see that extra little bit that's still there that we're trying to remove. So we remove that screw, we get that little bit of extra, and that down there, that guy is the pin. So inside the pump, when the pump goes to full throttle, it pushes that pin out, which bumps into that. And from the factory, this screw is turned in a bit. So, like I said, turn the screw all the way in, all the way that way, out, and you get full power from the pump. Now, it's worth noting, being that this is a turbocharged 3208, we can get away with removing that screw all the way. It's still probably going to be within, you know, reasonable amount of not smoking under boost. If you're doing this on a naturally aspirated 3208, you're likely going to end up much less. You know, you're not going to be able to adjust it that much. I don't know. I've never messed with a naturally aspirated one, so I don't know how much adjustment they can withstand without just pouring smoke. And frankly, you're not going to gain that much power with a naturally aspirated one by turning the fuel up. But if you want to have a little fun and blow some smoke, you know, I'm all for that. So regardless, that's what we're here for. We need to get that screw out of there. Now, again, you don't need to take this off if you're just adjusting your 3208. This can remain in place. All you need to do is loosen that 7/16, I think it is, and flathead back that out. Right now, we're just going to completely remove this guy. So 7/16 nut will come off, and the screw will thread out that way. Now, one concern I had is that, oh, without that thing there, that pin might just go right up through the hole, right? But actually it won't. You can see that it's way forward. It's actually not going to go through the hole, can't. So that's good. So another thing that I saw in the comments in the previous videos, and you guys are going to get on me in this one, EGT gauge. You need to have an EGT gauge. I don't have one. I don't recommend doing any tuning to a diesel. Well, all right, to be official and, you know, not cause any of you to do anything stupid, I'm going to say I don't recommend doing any diesel tuning without an EGT gauge. But do what you want at your own risk. You know, you gotta know where to draw the line, and you gotta have enough mechanical sympathy to know what's right and what's wrong. You know, going up a hill pouring a bunch of smoke out of your pipe is gonna be a problem, whether you have an EGT gauge or not. You're gonna know. You just know that that's wrong. I'm not towing with this thing. I'd like to get a trailer for it and do some real towing with it, but right now it's just a hot rod. It's just something I tool around with. I lay into the throttle sometimes. I have fun. I drive to get groceries. That's all it is, just a vehicle that I like to drive. So I'm not too concerned. Yes, I am going to put an EGT gauge on it eventually, but right now, this little bit of extra fuel we're adding to it, it ain't going to make a difference. Like I said, the way it was set up, basically maxed out already. It wasn't really smoking under throttle, so under boost. And it rolls coal off boost for a bit. And if you go up a hill or you really load it down in a higher gear, doing what you're not supposed to do, bog the engine down, you can make it roll a lot of coal. Just don't do that. You know, it's all about where your foot is. You know, you can monitor your EGTs. You can run lower EGTs if you just don't put your foot down. So just keep that in mind. EGT gauges are important on a diesel when you're tuning them up. So let me get this back together and we'll fire it up and see if it's any different. It's going to be a little bit of a pain to adjust that throttle linkage. That is actually the biggest pain about doing this, is just doing the throttle linkage and adjusting it. So we'll get that done. All right, so you can see when we throttle it, you can actually see that pin come out. The thing is, I'm noticing, that's normal. It seems to, you know what I think I got to do? I think I probably got to push down on it maybe. Because what we need to know is, when we're getting this to go all the way, is there any more travel left in the pump? That's pretty much, that's our go-to to how we know if we've maxed it out. So what I need to do is pretty much just put my finger down in there. You're not going to be able to film it, and push against that and see if there's, you know, any gap. I was thinking too, it might actually just be throttling further now, maybe. Now that that stop is gone, maybe I'm actually able to move it further without doing any adjustments. I'm not 100% sure on that yet. Because when I first did this, like the very first time I ever adjusted that, I never realized I needed to adjust the throttle a lot to compensate for it. So it made a difference. Just adjusting that made a difference. And I was driving it around, oh, this is incredible, it's got so much more power. And then one day I went and I looked and I realized I actually wasn't getting full throttle on the pedal. It was still more in the pump, and I adjusted that, and then it was like another night and day difference. So basically we just got to see, you know, is the pump going as far as it can possibly go with the throttle pedal itself, with that linkage. And if that pin is going up where that screw used to be, theoretically we should have more fuel. So how much more? Probably not much, but let me mess with that a little bit, and I'll bring you guys back when we fire it up. Another thing you want to do when you're messing with a diesel is have something to shut down the engine in case it runs away. I think that'll work. Now, slight disappointment. I don't think this is going to do anything because there was, no matter how much throttle you give, I maxed the pump out, you know, pretty much, long story short, we are already getting as much as we can get out of it. This throttle doesn't even need to be adjusted. It's already maxing out the pump, and there's still a gap between that little pin, so it was never actually a problem. In other words, I'm not going to gain anything from this, I don't think. Of course, we're not really going to know until I drive it and go full throttle. Just revving it up here in the driveway is not going to tell us anything, but I'm going to do that anyway. Of course, we're going to let it warm up for a while before we rev on it. Alright, well, we're basically going to throw scientific A/B testing out the window because I want to see how it sounds without the air cleaner on it. I'm going to actually drive it without the air cleaner on it, and if it makes a bunch more power, it might just be because of the open air cleaner, or the open no air cleaner. Of course, in the long run, that'll be a hot air intake, which is not good, but I can't resist. I have to try it. first I thought it felt quicker, and I was attributing it to the open air cleaner, but on a full hard pull all the way through the RPMs, I don't know, it didn't feel very impressive. But even if the throttle's going further, I don't know, it doesn't look like it was smoking any more than it was before. And again, it just doesn't really feel any more powerful than it was. Try low range, see what she does. So let's head down to Mexico, and we'll use the HP Tuners app on my phone and do a quarter-mile rip, and let's see how this thing does, and then we'll compare it to what it did before. Let's get back to the house and we'll talk about the data. Listen to a couple of swoos. Alright, well there it is. The 8th mile in 12.8 at 53 miles an hour, and the quarter mile at 20.2 at 67 miles an hour. Now, actually, I think that's pretty impressive. For a truck that weighs probably about 9,000 or 10,000 pounds, and when it was originally, when it was factory governed to 2,200 RPM, the thing would barely do 60 to 65 on the highway. So going 67 in the quarter mile is pretty impressive. It's very close to the time I did a couple years ago with it, which was at 20.3 at 66, 13.0 at 54 in the 8th. So definitely no improvement. I didn't think there would be. That's all the travel the pump has. If we take a look at our low range run, it was like basically the same as our old run. So 13.0 at 54 in the 8th, 20.4 at 66 in the quarter. So I knew it was going to be slower because, for one, it seemed like I was shifting like crazy and I wasn't going anywhere. And then also I ended up having to go to high range on the rear axle, which I wasn't expecting to have to. I probably could have revved it all the way out to the top of the range, but I didn't want to beat on it that hard. So yeah, that's it. There it is. I guess we're going to be needing to do some real work to this thing if we want to go any faster than that. So one more stupid thing we're going to try is something I did a couple years ago. I did a little burnout on the dirt with this thing, and I never actually tried it again. So let me just show you this really crappy footage that I had to get off my TikTok of the old one, and then we'll see if we can do it again. So that's actually pretty good. It's not any faster really than it was the last time I ran it. A little bit faster to the 1/8 mile, but about the same in the quarter. I think that could just be down to me launching it, taking off a little bit better. And I'm really not too surprised on the high range versus low range results. The low range results are slower by a very small amount, because I can't shift it that fast and it doesn't cover that much ground in second gear in low range. So really it's just a lot more shifting, which is just slowing it down, versus pulling through the gears longer is beneficial. But the Burnout was a failure. Man, I just couldn't get it. So I don't know. For one thing, it might be the fact that maybe the front brakes, well, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Is it maybe because like the front brakes aren't holding? No, because it's really holding at the back. Oh, I don't know. You know what it needs? It needs a line lock and a whole bunch more power. Yeah, so I guess that's going to be it for this one. Go ahead, and if you guys really want to help the channel out, go back and watch a whole bunch of my old videos. There's a lot of videos, a lot of stuff with the mowers, the tractor builds. There's a video on this Camaro, and there's some of the really early videos are cringe as hell, and you might get a laugh out of watching them with me in this truck doing some silly characters while I was very, very unsure of myself doing this YouTube thing. But I'd recommend going back and watching them. It'll help the channel out. I just talked a lot more than I should have about that. Regardless, like the video, subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and share the video with your friends. I do appreciate you watching, and I will see you next time.